This video will be an overview of our nutritional priorities. We're going to go from the most important foundational layer all the way up to the stuff that doesn't really matter but still needs to be discussed. We're going to give these things a short kind of introduction, and we're going to expand on this in the next videos that we make. We're going to get right into it. So this pyramid is our prioritizations. It starts at the base, that being calorie balance. And calorie balance, for most of you, is going to be the first thing that you look at when you're altering or impacting nutrition in any way. It can be from 50% of the whole nutritional discussion. That means over the things that have impact over your body composition, the way you look, it's 50% of the impact, all the way up to 100% of the impact. For some people, it's the only thing you ever address. And so you'll kind of be customized into how important each one of those things is for you on an individual basis. But for everyone, it is the foundational layer. It's the first thing that we address. Moving on, and we're going to kind of break all these things down. Macronutrients is about 25% of the conversation. If you're looking to look a certain way, then it's a little bit more important. And if you're just looking for kind of like weight loss, weight gain, it's far less important. But if you combine good calorie balance and good macronutrient balance, you pretty much have 75% of what nutrition can give you right out of the bat. So those are our big chunks, our big game changers that we would look to address. We're going to talk about them in a little bit of detail. We'll finish this. Nutrient timing is the next one. Now, nutrient timing is basically just when we should eat. Should we eat in the morning? Should we eat after 8 o'clock? Should we eat 6 meals a day? Should we eat after, before, or during training? It's the timing of the food. It's 10% importance. It does have an impact, and we'll go into pretty good detail about that. So for everyone more curious about that kind of, maybe it's a small margin, 10%, but want to kind of maximize how nutrition helps with their training, with how they look, with how they perform, then you'll probably find that stuff pretty interesting. After that, we have food composition. This is probably surprising for a lot of people, but food composition is what food you actually eat. So do you, as a carb source, as a calorie source, do you have bread, do you have pasta, or do you have rice? That would seem like it's an important question, but it turns out it's only about 5% of the impact over how you actually look. So what foods should we eat? That's food composition. We're gonna go that to some pretty good detail. However, if we zoom out and we take into the context, relative to calories, relative to macronutrients, which are proteins, fats, and carbs, it's very little importance, which surprises a lot of people, I feel. Last up, we have supplementation at the top. This is 5% importance, but it can be 0. They're not necessary to take, but they can be helpful in certain situations to allow you to get nutrients in that are otherwise difficult to get into your diet. The important part of this pyramid is the entire backside here is adherence. And adherence is basically, do you do it? Do you do the thing? The phrase that I use a lot is adherence is like a driver and a diet is like a race car. Kind of the simple explanation there is you can have the best race car in the world, the best diet in the world. It makes the most sense, it drives the fastest, it performs the best. But if you can't drive, if you have no adherence, it doesn't matter how good the car is, you can't drive it. Vice versa, if you had a absolute crap car, a really bad diet, but you had the best driver possible, your adherence to that diet was absolutely the best it could be, you would find that even a crap car in the hands of a correct driver actually performs quite well. And so nothing works unless you stick with it. And if you stick with the basics, even a basic car, even a basic vehicle, even a basic diet, you will achieve some really good results. So adherence is very important. All right, let's unpack these topics a little bit. So calorie balance is supremely important. It's the first thing you should address. And in simple terms, calorie balance is just about balancing your energy needs through the day. You kind of have two factors here. You have how much energy you use in a day. It's called energy expenditure. We're going to cover that in a little bit of detail in one of the videos, but every person burns a little bit different energy each day. That's demonstrated here in the green bars. And then on the other side, the other factor, we have calories ingested, which comes via food and drink, anything that has energy in it. This is indicated here by the blue bars. And so really you just have two things. You have how much energy do I use and how much energy do I eat? When I say calories, I do just mean energy. And in Australia, we track a lot of things via kilojoules, which is also just a measurement of energy. So when you hit calories, just think energy. We have a couple of different things we can do with our calories. So the first thing is we could expend more energy in a day than we consume. What this does is it results in weight loss. The body goes, we do not have enough energy. We are going to die. We need to be able to function and do lots of things. And so it takes the tissue you have stored on your body and it breaks that down as energy. This is when weight loss occurs and you break down muscle, you break down fat. Now the body tends to not really distinguish between those two tissues very well. And so what we have to do as trainees or as people who want to facilitate a good muscular body and a low fat body is usually weight train, send the signal to the body that, hey, we need this muscle to stay around, and eat a relatively high protein diet so that we can actually keep the muscle as we're losing the weight. If you're not doing those two things and you are just expending more energy than we're using, we call that a calorie deficit. If we are doing that, then you can assume that you will lose a decent percentage, a third, maybe up to a half, of your weight as muscle as well as fat, right? Okay, the next thing we can do is if we use just about as much energy as we intake, then we roughly stay the same or there's no or minimal weight change. We refer to this as maintenance. And maintenance calories is very healthy, you're very balanced, you're getting everything that your body needs. We wouldn't imagine that we would get very fast physique progress. If we're training in the gym, we would grow a little bit of muscle, especially in the first year, and that's a very unique case. In the first year of training, we'll develop a really robust muscularity even without the proper diet. However, once you're advanced past that point, if you want things to move quickly, maintenance is kind of like the middle ground between both things. It's not very good at losing fat. It's not very good at gaining muscle, but it is kind of like a nice, happy, healthy medium. Next up, we have our surplus. This is where calorie intake, energy intake, exceeds how much energy you use through the day. This will result in weight gain. If you're weight training, it will be a pretty good amount of muscle and some fat. If you surplus only a little bit, most of that will be muscle. If you surplus a lot, no matter how much you're weight training, a lot of that will be fat. And lastly, I wanted to make a special point to mention we can create a calorie deficit in two manners. The first one we can do is by simply lowering calories and keeping energy expenditure high. The second thing we can do is we can really up our energy expenditure to a point where the same amount of food still creates a calorie deficit because you're using a lot more. Both of these strategies are very viable. One of them takes a lot more time, and that's expending more energy per day. And so we usually recommend adjusting your calorie intake because that can be done regardless of your situation usually. However, one thing to note is there are a lot of strategies to impact and reduce calorie balance, and they don't always have to be simply eating less food. We can also just move more. We're moving on to macronutrients now. So macronutrients are the large components of your food. So any given food will be made up of a lot of different things, micronutrients to major nutrients. Those major nutrients we call macros, right? That's kind of how they're often referred to. The macronutrients we talk about are protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Now, unfortunately, you may see some sort of media that would claim that one of these things is not good for you, or not good in certain amounts, or not good for certain people, but they are all essential and play essential roles in your body, not just in terms of the way you look, but the way your cells function, how your actual body health functions. And so all of them are very good for you. None of these are inherently bad in any manner. With that said, this is their primary roles. I'm going to keep this simple. When you think protein, you can think of your muscularity. Now, proteins are involved in immeasurable amount of processes in your body, but we're talking about how it performs, or how it affects the way we perform, and how it affects the way we look. And so you can just think of protein as muscles. It helps you keep your muscle when you're in a calorie deficit and losing weight. It helps you, or gives you the building blocks to literally build new muscle when you're in a calorie surplus. And so protein is muscularity. Carbohydrates are energy. Carbohydrates break down and are absorbed in a few different types of energy sources. All of that energy is used to move or train or perform well in the gym. In fact, we have a really robust amount of studies that show that carbohydrates are very well linked to almost all performance outcomes, as well as mood improvements and a whole host of other things which we will get into. But when you think carbohydrates, you can think of energy. You can also think of fiber, which is mostly consumed via carbohydrates, it's a type of carbohydrate, as well as a lot of the micronutrients you would get from fruits and vegetables are mostly just carbohydrate sources, right? A banana is a carbohydrate, broccoli is mostly a carbohydrate. So fruits, veggies, grains, whole grains, all these things we get very unique micronutrients out. And so carbohydrates not only are energy, but they tend to be quite nutrient dense foods in other categories as well, making them very, very solid kind of a majority of our calorie intake, usually when we're at maintenance or in a surplus. Fats are the last one. The one thing to consider about fats is that they're 9 calories per gram, whereas proteins and carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram. So they're quite calorically dense. This can be something to modulate depending on if you're trying to gain weight or you're trying to cut weight. Fats kind of contribute generally to a whole host of healthy processes. If they are kind of a non-negotiable. You can't remove them from your diet or else you'll suffer some pretty quick health issues, from hormone regulation problems to like hair falling out of your head in extreme cases, and usually just immediate low energy sort of behavior. We don't take fats out of the diet. We try to keep protein high. We'll get into the specific amounts in other videos, but generally what we do is if you are trying to gain weight, protein would stay, fats would stay, carbohydrates would move, and the same thing as you're deficiting. All that happens is that when you lose weight, your carbohydrates shrink, protein and fats stay the same. It's not that carbohydrates are in any way a cause of weight gain. It's simply that they are adjustable, where fats and proteins are not. Moving on to the lesser important stuff. So like I said before, if you're doing calorie balance well, you're doing macronutrient well, you're getting about 75%, maybe even more, of what you could even get from your food in terms of results for your physique. Nutrient timing is when we should eat. We're going to unpack that in another video. Food composition. What food should we eat? 5% importance. We'll get into it, but it's not the primary important factor when it comes to nutrition. And supplementation. Probably the one thing I can say when viewing this pyramid here is that it is a foundation and built skill set that starts at the bottom and works its way up. What we would recommend is that you guys really hone in on the bottom level, and then if you find that you are performing that quite well, if you can get your head around it and really implement it good, then I would start to kind of upskill up the pyramid. Keep in mind, there are a lot of people that are in unbelievably good shape or perform quite well that never really make it past this bottom pyramid. And there's some people that don't even use this sort of nutritional concepts at all, and they still make some pretty good gains.